Troy, how are you today? Thank you for joining us on the pre-shift.
Hey, I'm doing great, DJ. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Before we kick off, I'd love to have you just introduce yourself to our audience, who you are and what you do.
Yeah, I'm the CEO of Hot Palate America. It's the North American holding company of Pepper Lunch restaurants, and I support the brand as an executive globally as well. We are a Japanese fast casual concept, 540 locations in 17 countries and growing rapidly.
Awesome. So, Troy, you've had quite the career in hospitality. I'm curious what drew you initially to the restaurant business and what keeps you passionate.
Yeah, I was basically born into it. My dad owned some construction companies, one of which focused on bars, restaurants, and nightclubs. I thought I was going to be an architect. I really enjoyed that side of the planning and visionary process. Hurricane Andrew had something else in mind for me as I lived in Miami, changed the course of my life a little bit, ended up going and getting a job in a restaurant, Bennigan's, one of my favorite places on the planet. I'm glad it's trying to come back now, but worked my way up from busser to expo to kitchen manager in a year while going to college, and decided I was going to be a chef and went to culinary school very young, 17 years old, and did that whole thing. That was back before it was a 4-year degree and business degree associated with it and all that good stuff. It was just a simple vocational degree. So I had to go to business school, ended up going to business school, and really come from an entrepreneurial family. So that itch was always there, but I knew I needed that foundation. So in business school, I got recruited to Procter & Gamble. So I spent a little over 5 years getting a world-class professional education in the corporate world, and then got that itch to come back to hospitality. Started working in the hotel, resort, private club side of the business, both in the restaurant side and the food and beverage management side, banquets, all that fun stuff. Ultimately ended up being asked to help some owners and developers, ended up creating a management company, a turnaround management company. And for 18 years, we came in and turned around distressed assets or assets that people wanted to sell or buy. We'd come in, parachute in for 15, 18 months, get it turned around, get the proper management in place, proper processes. And, all the while food and beverage restaurants being a huge part of that profit center. And then in 2012, 13, my partner at our consulting firm, Mark Bailey, was kind of a one-man shop doing emerging brand, QSR, fast casual, mostly some casual scaling, and in helping founders and founders that are funded by private equity get their business stood up and get ready for scale. And franchise model was often a part of that. And he asked me to come help him. He was too busy. I helped him on a couple of projects, and I just got the bug. So ultimately, I sunsetted the management company over a couple of years and ramped up the Kiwi Restaurant Partners, which is a brand scaling consulting firm. We provide an outsourced fractional C-suite to help founders and investors scale their brands. And that's how we ended up at Pepper Lunch. Pepper Lunch called, hired us as consultants first, asked us to put a plan together for the United States and North American growth. They saw that plan and said, we got to have you on the team. And so they made it so that I could come over, be the CEO, and start to bring our team over the next year. And here we are almost 3 years later. That engagement started in October of 2022. So we're about 4 months away from when we started helping Pepper Lunch, and February will be 3 years I've been CEO.
That's awesome. So, just to understand your background a little bit more, coming from that, the corporate side and the management side and back into restaurants, was it just, the hospitality, the bug that you had growing up and working in the industry that made you want to, marry those two knowledge bases, that corporate and business mindset with the food?
Yeah, I don't know what it is. It has been a draw. It's been a black hole sucking me back in every time. And once I came out of Procter & Gamble corporate life and said, all right, I am going to make a career in hospitality, I got very, very serious. I knew that I wanted to hold as many different roles and master as many of the skills within each of those roles, because ultimately I wanted to own my own restaurant group. A lot of people are like, oh, I want to have my own restaurant one day. I want to own my own restaurant group one day, right? And so, and luckily I am at that point where I'm an investor, owner, partner in several brands and outright own a couple of things. So, that was the goal. And I knew to get there, I needed to learn and master as many of the roles in the industry as possible. The other side for me was always learning. I'm a very curious person. When I want to master something or understand something, I want to understand all of it, every end of it, the whole global visibility of it. So, I was very lucky to find mentors early on, basically ask everybody who was my boss or above me or had achieved a couple of levels above where I had achieved to please provide me that level of support and insight, and be respectful of their time and be thoughtful about my questions and the time I asked for. But I'm not shy about asking people who've been where I want to go, how they got there. And that's what's propelled me up the ladder, I guess you could say.
This is a loaded question coming, from the corporate background and all of that, but I'm curious, with our listeners being restaurant operators, aspiring operators, maybe they're trying to get from that one to two, opening more locations. I'm curious for your perspective, what was like the biggest learning curve going from, working in one restaurant and moving into that leadership role and starting to really grow a brand versus, grow maybe a single unit restaurant or a small group?
Yeah, I mean, I think the main realization when you kind of make the leap from management to executive is that you no longer do all the work, that you don't have direct hands in everything and every detail of everything, that you have to rely on other people. So find really good people, give them the tools, knowledge, and resources, and lend your experience. Get the things that they need from outside of your capacity, capability, or experience. That's my job. I'm a resource supplier, right? My job is to put them in a position to excel and give them what they need and the empowerment to do the job that they know they can do. That's the big leap. And for a single unit restaurateur or small family group of restaurants that the family's running or something like that, letting go is the hardest part. And so you just have to understand that you know what you know, and you need to apply that in more of a overview, visionary, strategic planning, direction giving, painting the map in front of everybody so they know where they're trying to get. And then you need to let people do their job and give them what they need to do it really well.
Absolutely. Is there something you see, in particular that people have a really hard time letting go of? Maybe they're able to delegate certain things, but what do people typically hold on to a little too hard, grip a little too firmly?
I think everybody's different. I think anything relative to the pennies, saving pennies and losing dollars is a very common scenario in our business. I would say this, though, my advice or the way I would reframe this is if you're listening and you want to let go, but you're having a hard time let go, step back and ask yourself, what do you really love to do in this business? What is it about this, your business, that you love the most? What is that? Doesn't matter what it is. It could be menu development. It could be marketing. It could be hiring. It could be anything inside the business, but pick that 1 to 3, not more than 3 things that you think you just absolutely have ultimate passion for, and everything else has to be outsourced. You have to let the other people do everything else. Find the person who really loves those other things and find the people that love all of those other things and let them be as passionate about those pieces of the business that you're not. That's the trick, right? So it doesn't, every person's clinging on to something and they're forcing themselves to do things they hate doing. And by the way, if you hate doing it, you're probably not very good at it, or you're not as good at it as somebody else who loves doing it. And look, people who love spreadsheets freaking love spreadsheets. Let them do the spreadsheets. Like, give them the direction. Tell them what you're trying to get. What is the goal here? What information do you need? What outcomes do you need? What performance do you need? Let them know that. Give them what they need to do it, and then just coach. Just coach along the way.
So I'm curious, shifting gears a little bit here into Pepper Lunch. So Pepper Lunch has 500, is it 500 plus locations?
540
across Asia?
locations in 17 countries today. Yep.
Oh.
Yeah, we're really almost everywhere, right? We're in every Asian country. We're in Australia, US, and Canada. We're now have deals coming in the Middle East. We're beginning the development process of Brazil and now the UK. And from the UK, we'll jump off to the rest of Europe. So, world domination.
Yeah,
That's really what we're
Seems
going
like
for.
it. Antarctica
Yeah.
frontier. I'm curious, when they came to you looking to expand that into North America, is that correct? So
Yep.
they didn't have any
Yep.
locations here yet, or they had a couple?
Yeah, they actually had 5 locations. They had one master franchisee, our Australian franchisee, who's very experienced with the brand, sent one of the partners over. They had pioneered the corporate entity before we bought them. So Hot Palate is a holding company that is owned by a private equity firm that bought the brand in 2020. Prior to buying it, they had knocked on that door, opened one store in Canada, and then a couple of corporate stores here in the US, which they ultimately walked away from. But the history was a little tumultuous in the United States, to say the least. And then when we took over in 22, it was basically start from scratch. It was built from ground up. Well, one benefit of having those 5 stores in the US is we had history. We had some knowledge about what was working, what didn't work, what translated, what didn't translate. So there's definitely some advantage there. But from a corporate entity, there was no oversight or control. So there was no brand presence in that scenario. So as of 2022, when I took over, we established that brand presence.
Tell me a little bit more about the brand. What made it attractive to you to be able to lead and and bring it to America and like you said, start that world domination. Tell me a little bit more about it because I think, well, it may be known in other parts of the world. It's still relatively new here
Yeah,
in the US
yeah.
and Canada.
So I took the approach of, and then back to my advice of just a couple minutes ago. I love to build. I love to find things, ideas or concepts or single proof of concept stores or whatever it is. I like to build. I like to refine. I like to optimize. I like to find ways to see a brand express itself in more than just its singular brick and mortar ideation. There's just a lot there that I love to grate my hands around a brand and do with, right? And so when we look at something like this, whether it was as consultants, investors, buyers, or executives, as a role, we really look at it as if I was on the other end of this. So what are you asking me to do? You're asking me to sell franchises in the United States, Canada, and beyond to sophisticated multi-unit franchisees. So I put myself in that person's shoes and I say, all right, I'm going to look at this brand. I looked at it whether or not I would want to be a franchisee of it. I looked at it if I would want to invest in it. And I look at it as if I can sell this. Can I get other franchisees that know what they're looking at in a competitive market to look at this? So that's the question. So when we look at it, we saw quite a few things that stood out. One for me was authenticity. This was founded 30 years ago in Japan, and the recipe today is the same as it was 30 years ago in Japan. So I love the authenticity of it. I love that Asian cuisine at the time had been on the rise for at least 3 years already as the number one growing. Not only had we gone from sushi to ramen and now ramen to Korean barbecue, but now the ancillary other foods of Asia were starting to be appreciated. We saw the rise of culture, Asian culture adoption. The young people of the country are enamored with all of the forms of media around Asia, food, videos, movies, shows, anime, cartoons, etc. Those were not the leading things, but those were very interesting. That's what got me curious. Then when we dug into the business, when we realized, oh my God, there's at the time very little to virtually no prep. We're at no prep now. We've removed the knives from the store, but at the time, little to no prep. No culinary skill was required because all of that primary prep was done outside the building. We're just assembling food on a hot plate. That the stores were being run with 4 or 5 people total, so much lower labor model overall. The simplicity of the concept, right? It's protein, rice, and veg, protein, pasta, and veg. And so it's really taking really high quality ingredients, assembling them in a beautiful way, and then presenting them with different sauces so the customer actually cooks it themselves. To that point, I put a lot of emphasis on the experiential side. This is an experiential fast casual. Not since Chipotle, okay, have we had something that was interactive, right? Chipotle inventing the down the line, then Blaze Pizza down the line, then Sweetgreen down the line, but nothing's really happened in that space since that innovation in our industry. And this is really experiential. You're talking about sizzling hot plates. You can see them, you can hear them, you can smell them. You get your food, you cook it your way. You can have it mixed or not mixed, and all the different choices. It's a phenomenal experience. And so that experiential piece was very interesting to me. I thought it stood out dramatically. And then, listening to the story of the new ownership and the honoring of the legacy of the brand and maintaining authenticity, wanting to express this culture outside of Asia, I thought that was a huge opportunity and very interesting and very palatable in the market as an investment vehicle. So, there's a lot of things about Pepper Lunch that stood out, but those are sort of the highlights. There's 5 or 6 things that stood out right out of the gate that we were like, oh, this is different. This is a winner. There's a way to do this. If we build the infrastructure correctly, if we have the right people that are there to support the franchisees, if we focus on the franchisees' experience and success, and we maintain these standards of quality and simplicity and authenticity, this thing is a winning formula. And that's really what we saw. We saw this sort of big picture winning formula of some key ingredients that we knew we could sell, because at the end of the day, that's our job, is to sell and support franchisees. And so we thought it was worth a go, and it's working out pretty okay right now.
Yeah, it's exciting. And back to that experiential aspect, just so I guess so people understand it, the analog I'm thinking of when you explain it, and I'm looking at the website now, which similar to like when, Mexican restaurant, they bring out the sizzling fajitas and everyone kind of turns their head and looks. But in this case, it's just, that's what everything is. So it's just,
So every entree comes
thing.
out. Yep. Every entree comes out on a 500-degree iron plate We have proprietary patented iron plate and induction system. We're all induction. We're no gas. And so our job is to superheat a hot plate to 500 degrees in 74 seconds on our induction unit and assemble on top of it high quality proteins, rice, vegetables, or instead of rice, we have pasta dishes too. Of course, we have vegetarian, we have a salad. It's all encompassing, but the majority of the dishes go out on this sizzling hot plate. Like a fajita, it has that sizzling sound, sight, smell, vision. But the difference is our plate's 500 degrees, not 240 degrees. We're not putting an ice cube or a piece of dry ice on it to make it steam. This stuff is really hot. You're actually cooking your food on your plate. So instead of when you go to a lot of like Korean barbecue or other similar Japanese is yakiniku or other style foods, where there's some kind of cooking implement, shabu shabu, some kind of cooking implement on or in the table. We don't have that. The cooking implement is your plate itself, which is pretty spectacular, pretty cool.
Yeah, so I'm curious. So, those are the reasons I think, not to you, but just in general, that made Pepper Lunch attractive from a franchising standpoint. And I'm just curious in general, does it always have to be something that is, evolutionary, like, Pepper Lunch seems to be from your description of it, in the same way you talk about Chipotle, like, what are some of the key factors, to consider if a concept is ready to be franchised?
Yeah, I get it all the time. Look, it's really about mindset and readiness of the people. The concept can always be adjusted, refined, or amended, right? It can be simplified, it could be streamlined, it could be expanded, it could be changed in a lot of ways. But it's really about the mindset of the people. And the first thing I say to people when they say, "Hey, I got 3 or 5 of these stores. My family's been running it. I want to franchise it. Am I ready?" My question to them is, are you ready to get out of the restaurant industry? Because you're no longer going to be operating restaurants. You're going to be a service provider being paid a significant fee by restaurateurs, franchisees to run your brand for you, to expand the legacy and reach and accessibility of your brand. So you have to get in the mindset of you're going to stand up a separate corporation, a separate business. You're going to build a separate team, and you're going to do a different job in servicing your franchisees. That's number one. That's a mindset shift. Are you ready for that change in your career, your ownership journey? Two, what are your metrics? What's going on in the existing store or stores? Where are we at? Because you have to be competitive. And I'll tell you this, 4 years ago, even 2019, even 2022, 23, you could get away with grossing 1.2 million and having an 15 to 18% EBITDA. That's not going to cut it. It's not marketable anymore. It's not competitive anymore. You really need to be at 1.5, 1.6 gross, and you better be north of 20% EBITDA, because people are going to pay royalties and they have to make a living after that. So there's some metrics there that are sort of to make you competitive and interesting. At the end of the day, anything can be made to be franchisable. But yes, of course, if you have a core product, you're an excellent operator, you have raving fans, you have some kind of secret sauce or special thing. And look, it doesn't have to be this unique thing that Pepper Lunch is, right? Because in Asia, we're unique, but we're not that unique. It's Asian, it's Japanese food. But our implementation, our delivery model, our service model of being fast casual is unique. But it doesn't matter if you're doing chicken, pizza, burgers, burritos. It matters that you're doing something better or different, and hopefully both. You're doing it better and you're doing something a little different, and that you have traction. You have customers that are raving. One thing I like and don't like, I like when people tell me every day somebody asks me, or once a week somebody asks me if I'm franchising, they want to franchise, right? Now, just so you know, the people asking you if they could franchise your business, it's probably Bob and Sally, the auto body shop owner and salon owner. They might not be, and probably are not, the best first franchisees, if ever the right franchisees. But having raving fans that are promoting you and want to see you expand is a good indicator that there's something unique there for sure.
Absolutely. I'm also curious too, about just the franchise model and adapting it to different markets, right? Because as you expand, there's going to be differences in local markets. Are there changes coming, with Pepper Lunch from adapting it like to an American, North American market? Or is it pretty much the same as it is in other parts of the world?
Yeah. So kind of two pieces to that, thinking about Pepper Lunch and thinking about how other people should look at this. I made a decision very early on and convinced the global leadership that actually I wanted to go back to center. I wanted to make sure we had not strayed away, or our previous franchisee had not strayed, and they really hadn't. But we really wanted to sort of hit the reset button back to baseline and then ask ourselves, what is baseline? What is the recipes, portions, quality level, etc. Now, in the US, we were able to negotiate supply chain, increase our protein's quality level 1 or 2 or more degrees on the scale across the board in this exercise. But we asked ourselves, what are the recipes in Asia? What works there? What are the differences between Singapore and Philippines? Because there are. What's the difference between Philippines and Vietnam? Because there are. We do localize the menu about 20% on a country by country basis usually, but we really hadn't done that in the US. So the question was, what does the 20% of the menu being Americanized look like? And I didn't like the options. Mashed potatoes and broccoli were not interesting to me. That's not Japanese. And it's not what so I really want to go back to center and focus on the core value, core product, and then let the market tell us that that does or doesn't work. And what we found, because we launched a new menu, when I say a new, it's really a revised, improved, upgraded menu last July, is immediately and since then we've had a 5 to 9x adoption of the new menu over the old menu. So all the items we took away versus all the items we added or changed, we have a between 5 and 9x purchase rate on the new items over the old items. So what that tells us is that the original and authentic and refocused on higher quality, maybe the portions, we did increase some portions for the American palate and audience. We did tweak some of the flavor profile a little bit. I think we're going to do some tweaking again this year. It's a little too peppery for black pepper. It's a little too much pepper maybe for the American palate. But, we made those changes and then crossed our fingers and prayed, right? We had to jump off the cliff once. And now we have data. Right now we can make informed decisions. And so now we're rolling out dessert for the first time in a couple of weeks. We're rolling out our first LTO, but we're taking those steps very baby step, right? A little bit at a time. Our LTO is just 2 things we already have put together. It's going to be breaking news, by the way, DJ. Nobody's heard this yet. It's coming out in about 4 or 5 weeks. It's surf and turf, right? We're going to take half of our New York steak we already have, and we're going to take 3 of our panko shrimp we already have. We're going to put them together on a plate, and it's going to be a surf and turf. For us doing an LTO for the first time, you have to be thoughtful about how much lift you're requiring of your franchisees, how much work are we adding to their existing, right? So we have to be careful and thoughtful. And we also don't want to get crazy with our customers. We want to see our customers tell us that this is something they're interested in by buying it and trying it and repurchasing it. So, long story is you got to be thoughtful. Now, for anybody else, does the menu need to change from California to Texas to Florida? No, it actually doesn't. But supply chain helps dictate some of that. The availability of some of your ingredients help dictate that. That's why you should grow concentrically from where you started. If you are a Dallas, Texas concept, you should grow through Texas, or Arkansas, Oklahoma, Nebraska, Kansas first, go up into Missouri, et cetera, first, maybe over to Indiana, because you're going to find more of the people like the ones that are already your customer and your fan, right? Trying to adapt to the customer in a different market is a recipe for disaster, because you need to be proud of what you have, and you need to find the people that want that in every market, right? So that's the hard part. Are there enough people in each market that want what you have? And do you have the money, time, and stamina to wait them out? You gotta bring them to you. You gotta spend the marketing. You gotta attract people. You gotta get people to do trial and bringing friends back. And so you have to build an audience, and that takes time, and it takes a lot of money. It takes a lot of stamina. I see a lot of people go to new markets and give up in 2-3 years. Hey, newsflash, it's going to take a while.
Yeah. What are some of the more successful, I mean, obviously it varies, but successful tactics you've seen to breach into new markets? And I am curious if you find that people make the mistake of trying to jump, let's say from a Dallas,
Every
I'm going
day.
from Dallas to
Every
Atlanta
day.
where I am. Like my restaurant was great in New York. LA
Biggest
would be
mistake that you can make in the entire damn industry is, I've got this great idea. And by the way, I see it a lot for some reason in Florida concepts and California concepts. I don't know why, 2 ends of the bookends, but oh man, Dallas is hopping and popping. We got to get to Dallas, and we open 1 store in Dallas, and we open 1 store in New York City, open 1 store in Miami. Well, that works for some of these very large format, $30 million a year concepts, right? Din Tai Fung is a great example. Well, Din Tai Fung's been around for a gazillion years. It's huge in Asia. It established a massive presence in California and success. And they had raving fans all over the world that they could leverage in these major markets. Sexy Fish, Delilah, there's a few of these, right? But that doesn't translate in most QSR fast casuals, just heads up, right? Or family casual restaurants. You've got to know who your customer is. You got to really understand who your customer is. And then you got to ask yourself, do I have that customer there? Here's the biggest mistake. It will not work with just one store. No, you don't have enough radius. People aren't going to drive to your store from 15 miles away because you chose to plop yourself down in the center of Scottsdale. People aren't coming from all over Phoenix, 45-minute drive to you. It's not happening, right? If you don't have some sort of national, fandom or TikTok, virality, it's just not happening. So first, with a QSR fast casual, particularly because they're very scalable, when you drop a flag in a market, you have to know that enough of your customers are there. You have to make sure they know about you. You have to ask your existing customers here to tell people there about it. And then you need to open 3 stores as quickly as you can because you have to get market penetration. You have to get some saturation of availability. Because if you are in downtown and your business is daytime business office people, right? When they go home to the suburbs or even in the urban, out of the hyper urban corridor into the urban corridor, they're not coming back. They're not going to get their family and bringing them back, right? So you've got to be along the life cycle. Think about the journey, the life journey of people, right? My family is scattered from here, here, and here. What are the 3 major points in a market? I'm going to start in this suburban market. That is not going to translate to urban market because you're a family gathering Friday night at 5 o'clock restaurant. You're not a in and out in 35 minutes in downtown business restaurant, right? So you really have to understand who your customer is, where they are, and then you need to, in my opinion, grow concentrically. If you're gonna sort of dominate regionally, right? Go from Atlanta to Charlotte, right? Go from Miami to Fort Lauderdale to West Palm. Go from Tampa to St. Pete. Like, have adjacent markets that you can connect with. I think it's no mistake. There's a reason that a lot of concepts are coming out of Atlanta and DC because you can kind of grow concentrically out in this bigger ring that gets you to sort of same people, new locations. So there's a lot to it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm curious, like you said, it seems like there's, the playbook of, I like the way you're describing it as like the natural kind of progression of like, a family. I'm thinking of like, me here in Atlanta, like my wife's family lives in 30 minutes away here. And then, we have siblings and in-laws that live, a little bit further in the city. I'm in the suburbs. It's like that kind of 3 plot points. And I think that's how you start to try and build word of mouth and just brand awareness. What are some of the bigger more successful tactics you've seen or that you employ, just in your career to help people start to kind of penetrate the market and start to kind of grow their circle?
Yeah. So again, back to using some technology to understand who your customer is. It's really inexpensive to geofence your restaurant, and you can geofence it today and get about 4 to 5 years of back data. And that data is who's coming to you demographically, all of the demographic points you can imagine and learn about them. Where are they coming from? How far are they driving? How long is the drive? Where did they come from? Did they come from a industrial complex, from an office complex? Did they come from a suburban residential neighborhood? Those kinds of things. That's a very easy tactic. And a million people can geofence and get you that data. That's a starting point. Then understanding your customer directly. So employing, whether it's listening through Momo's type product or direct interaction through an Ovation type product, getting direct one-to-one feedback from your customer. What do they love about you? What's unique? If only one item could remain on the menu, what's that item they would want? If an item could go away on the menu, what item would they get rid of? Ask your customer. And by the way, ask your employees, right? You need to do market research, and the market research is inside the 4 walls. Now, I'm a big fan of going to friends, family, neighbors, your kids' parents, your kids' friends' parents at the baseball field or the soccer field. Look, ask around there. Hey, I'm a small business owner. I got 3 or 5 of these restaurants. I'm thinking about building some more out in the other suburbs or expanding out to where some growth is. Can I ask you a few questions? If I were to open a restaurant, I love this. I've done this a number of times. Go to where you think you want to go. Go to a grocery store, gas stations, and stand in line. Go to places you can stand in line, and then just turn around to the person behind you. And I'm a really loud guy, so if I turn around to you in line, the next 4 or 5 people hear me and want to chime in too, and just say, hey, I'm new to this area. We're thinking about opening our restaurant that we're really popular over in that area. We're thinking about coming out here as well. Is this the kind of restaurant? Would you find this interesting? If I did that, what would matter most to you? Right? Is it parking? Is it drive through? Is it a convenience question, or is it a quality question? Is it an experiential question? What are the most important things to you if I open this kind of restaurant in your neighborhood that would make you want to come and bring all your friends, family, neighbors, colleagues, etc.? Market research. You got to know what you're walking into, because I don't care. I'm going to tell you, Los Angeles, Phoenix, Dallas, Houston, Atlanta, Miami, New York, DC, Chicago are not the same. Period. Humans are different. Their likes and dislikes, their behaviors, their life flow patterns, their recreational patterns, their work habits, they're different in these different markets, and you need to understand that.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm curious, just want to go back. You said geofencing your restaurant, getting kind of that back data. How would one go about doing that? What platforms?
Yeah, you're going to go to one website. It's called GOOGLE. Google. Actually, you might want to chat GPT that thing or Claude that thing or Gemini that thing today. But that's the answer. Look, there's a lot of companies out there that do that. Most are marketing agencies, marketing kind of companies. There are media companies that do that. You actually could call your local radio station or TV station. They're not in the radio or TV business anymore. They never have been. They're in the advertising business. So they have a lot of data. You can get serious and invest. We use a platform called SiteZeus. There's others like it out there that can compile this for you. It's not cheap. 30 plus $1,000 to have a GIS white space mapping system if you're really serious and ready to go. But there's a lot of resources out there, and it's not expensive to just geofence and get some data. And you can ask the questions. Here's what I need to know, or you can ask these experts, what should I know? For us, it's about 362 data points, and we don't just do demographic. We actually do sociographic. It's one of the reasons we chose SiteZeus is that they actually can correlate the cell phone that was tracked on the geofence. They can correlate that to the person's Meta account. So now they know what they're liking, commenting on, what content they're watching, and it buckets them in genres, right? So for us, love and romance, for some reason, really high score. The people that are into love and romance, movies, so cinephiles, people that like and watch a lot of movies. Of course, people that are into Asian food and culture, but also foodies. It says, the foodie community, because you would view us as kind of an adventurous step out of the norm experience for food, right? So you compile an image of who your cohort is, and then what percentages. We found out that 50% of our customers are under 30 years old. That was a huge revelation for us. So that becomes a major consideration when we look at new markets. What's the average age? We're not a baby boomer brand, right? We are a Gen Z, Gen Alpha brand truly going forward. So those insights are really, really interesting. But by the way, I tell people this all the time. Sit in your restaurant with a yellow pad or a white pad or a little journal book and just start recording what you see. Who's coming in? Do some ages, do some genders, do some nationality, ethnicities, look at what they're buying, okay? And start ticking them off. It's just a spreadsheet at the end of the day. You want to sit there with a laptop and a spreadsheet and just start ticking off? All right, there's a 20-some-year-old female Indian ethnicity, and she bought this entree, or she bought this cluster of things. And for us, it's one Asian person bringing a bunch of non-Asian people to our restaurant. It's very, very common that an Asian ethnicity person wants to bring people from their friend group, school group, work group, or family, maybe they're in a mixed family, to our restaurant and expose them to our food. So we're a little unique in that we're that ethnic specific brand. That may not play for everybody, but you can do this analog in your store.
Absolutely. And I mean, that influences everything from, maybe not the menu per se, but marketing, location,
Everything.
choice, growth, and just how your brand is.
It influences everything. Absolutely.
I want to just, kind of shift gears a little bit. We talked about the big mistake being the wrong location or trying to go too far outside. Are there any other big mistakes that you see that are easily avoidable?
Well, let me harp on the real estate for a second.
Sure thing.
After deciding on and partnering with a franchisee, so after marrying our business partner, the franchisee, right? It's at least a 10-year relationship. And for us, if you're building 5 stores over 3 years, it's actually a 13-year relationship at the minimum. So after that decision is made and you've sold the franchise to a great partner operator, The second and most important decision you will make together is real estate. It is the thing we spend the most time and money on as the franchisor. We put the most effort in. We have the most people involved. We have the most technology applied towards the real estate decision because you cannot change it once you've committed. And one of the biggest mistakes we ever see is people call and they're like, hey, I'd love to be a Pepper Lunch franchisee. Here's 3 addresses I've already leased. Oh my God. And this happens all the time. People, do not call the number in the window. Do not call the number on the sign outside. Never call a landlord representative for real estate. There's laws around what will happen if you do that. You will not have the flexibility. You will not have the ability to get represented for a portion of the commission. There's a lot of reasons, but you need to build this from the ground up. This is foundational. And so why is your store the size it is? Why is it the shape it is? What infrastructure does it need, right? Are you capable of getting that infrastructure? Can the hood go where it needs to go? Can you put the capacity of electricity in? Do you have the water and sewage you need? There's so many considerations. And what we find is people get enamored with, the corner of A and Main, and they make a real estate decision before they even understand whether the brand will work there. So real estate is where you need the most help, you need the most information, you need to be the most cautious, and you got to know about 1,000 points of information before you finally make that decision. Look, anybody can put a contingent LOI in to be first in line and get the conversation going, but you need to have representation and you need to have more than just a realtor on your side to understand whether your brand works there. So that's the most common mistake. It's the most painful mistake. It's the most costly mistake. It will tank your restaurant. It will tank your brand, your business, and potentially bankrupt the entire corporation overall.
Yeah. So avoiding, seeing, like you said, that perfect spot that's for rent or for lease, and you say, well, a restaurant would be perfect there, right?
Well, I'll ask you this. Why is it empty? Right. So the best restaurants we're getting now is we're actually buying second gen restaurants. We're knocking on doors of existing restaurants and saying, would you like to get out of your lease? Oh my God. The only reason this thing's still open is because I can't get out of my lease. I would love you can have it. And they just hand over the keys, right? Pay a little bit for the equipment that might be useful there or whatever. But that's what you want. You want somebody who's getting old and tired or wants to hand this off, and he thought the kids were going to take it, and the kids aren't going to take it, and he just wants out of the lease, and he's got 8 years left on a 10 or 15, God forbid, 20-year lease. You can renegotiate, assume that lease, and potentially build your concept there. If again, and I'll say this, DJ, the other big mistake, or the other, besides geofencing as one tactic, a major thing to understand is where else does your customer go? Where do they go for recreation? Where do they go for entertainment? Where do they go for business? And where else do they eat? And if you understand that, then you have co-tenancy. You understand co-tenancy. So how do we know who the co-tenant of a Pepper Lunch is in Atlanta, Georgia? Well, I know that 50% of my customers are under 30 years old. I know all the sociographic things about them. That's great. I can map that. But actually, our price point, right? We're fast casual, but most fast casuals are $10.50 to $12.50 per plate average. We've gone from $15.80 to $18 a plate, and we haven't raised our prices. People are putting more on their plate, but we're $18 a plate, $30 to $32 a ticket. Well, who else is in our price point, right? I don't care if you want or love our food. If we're 50% or 70% more than what you're willing to pay as a consumer for an average meal, meaning you're a $10 to $12 or $13 customer, or maybe a $15 customer, we're still a leap from that. So we have to find the customers that spend $15.50 to $20 on a plate. Who are they? Kava, Sweet Green, maybe Chipotle. Even though Chipotle is lower on the price point, they appreciate the quality of Chipotle. So, it's quality, it's price point, it's demographic. You have to have that whole picture. So for us, co-tenancy is a huge deal. Who's in the plaza? What are the pads out along the outer perimeter? Are they drawing our customer in so our customer discovers us and realizes, oh, okay, I usually pay that for lunch or dinner. I'm going to check it out.
Yeah. We're also seeing, I guess where else they shop, what else they do for recreation, what stores they shop at, if it's like the Sephoras of the world or if it's, different things like that. I'm curious as we just kind of, come at our time here, a lot of great advice for franchisees and people who are franchising in restaurants who want to get into the franchise game and franchise their business. I'm just curious, what the biggest challenge has been for you with Pepper Lunch, bringing it here and growing it, and how'd you overcome that challenge?
Yeah, I mean, primary challenge is educating the market, right? We have to educate the franchisee prospect market. And for us, we've decided it's the multi-unit and or multi-brand experienced operator that we want to work with. Predominantly, we do have some folks that are sort of a conglomerate, executives or leaders or managers from those kinds of organizations coming together with investment to do their own, which is fine too. So that's one, right? Educating the B2B market, so to speak, that what Pepper Lunch is, why it's a great investment, why it's a long-term successful endeavor venture for them. And then the second part is that we have to educate the consumer, right? We have to find people that are looking for these types of experiences, foods, price points, et cetera, and make sure they know. And so that's a huge challenge, right? And so for us, it's really about not only the amount of money, but the smart spend of money to get that message out there in the most effective way. And podcasting and speaking at keynoting or on panels at conferences. We ran trade ads heavily in the first year to get the word out. It's just sort of this building block of initial awareness, refined understanding, detailed investigation, and kind of just work that funnel, so to speak, both on the business side and on the consumer side. So a lot of work, a lot of iteration, right? There is no real winning playbook here. It's different for every brand and every brand journey. And as your brand evolves and as you grow, the story and the reach and who you're trying to get in front of changes slightly over time. And so you just have to be nimble and flexible and willing to try things and change things and not be so stiff and rigid about what you think works. Because if you just pick one thing and that story doesn't resonate, you're stuck, right? You gotta find all the different ways of expressing your value proposition to your audience and make sure that you get in front of them as much as you can.
Absolutely. Troy, with that time, curious where people can find you, Pepper Lunch, if they want to learn more about what you're doing, if they want to franchise, they want to open a location, or if they just want to find out more about what you guys are up to.
Easy peasy. You can follow Pepper Lunch or Troy Hooper on LinkedIn. We put out a lot of content about the brand and what we're doing and what we're offering and what people are saying about us. And then Pepper Lunch Restaurants, plural.com. Pepper Lunch Restaurants with an S on the end.com. And the franchise, there's a button there. Check out the main page. Check out all the things we talk about in news and blogs and all that fun stuff. Then click on that franchise button. There's a whole lot of information. We have a really cool portal. If you sign in and ask for more information, we have about a 26-step information portal that will walk you through videos and graphics and decks and fun stuff like that. So a lot of information out there about who, what, where, and all that about Pepper Lunch is available.
Excellent. Troy, well, thank you so much for hopping on and sharing so much with us. And, looking forward to learning more. And yeah, just thanks again.
Thanks, DJ. Glad to be here.